what's going on, everyone? Hope everyone's doing well. So, 2020 is, it's going to be the year of new consoles again, from both Sony and Microsoft, as they steam ahead into what we call the next generation of hardware. That's designed, to supposedly remove more technological barriers, that made gaming so far not quite up to scratch in terms of performance and of course gameplay and worlds that they keep on going on about. I guess this has always been the biggest driver for new hardware to come to the market, right? Where games, simply can't achieve the true visions of the developers' wants and needs. And of course, this is true in many cases. And us as players, always look for those games to provide us with experiences that we believe or can prove, just weren't possible before. And of course, another big talking point in gaming today, or has always been, since consoles started pumping out 3D graphics, is performance. Even more so in today's gaming market, which now likes to see consoles, given mid-gen upgrades, with the likes of the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X being examples. Plus, you get a wealth of people begging for the so-called Switch Pro, as many people just aren't quite happy with the performance of the current Nintendo Switch. And I mean performance, where, we start talking about those big marketing highlights, frame rates and all this, resolution and all this stuff. But one thing of late, I've questioned, probably starting from the Wii, the PS3 and the 360 generation, is why do we seemingly get bored with consoles, to the point that we crave the next generation, and I mean us as gamers and consumers. There are, of course, a number of reasons, why we feel that the time to move on is upon us, when it comes to consoles. I mentioned the Wii, and for many, graphically, they were already, already long, ready, I suppose, to move on, because at that time the PS3 and the Xbox 360 were out. And looking at those games compared to the graphical fidelity of the Wii games, just from a casual consumer point of view, it just looked night and day. I'm going to exclude PC from this conversation, because as a platform, it's essentially always at the peak of what's possible, technology-wise, in terms of graphics and sound, as well as other things. But consoles have always been behind in many areas. Yet at the same time, it's not like many PC games push modern PCs to their breaking points, but I'll get to that in a bit anyway. But I can understand when people looked at the Wii from a graphical point of view, and said, yes, I've had enough now. Because the Wii was, essentially, as we called it, a GameCube 2.5. So when you go back to the generation, you talk about the PS2 and the Xbox generation, and those were long generations in themselves. And you could start seeing, a bit towards the end where the technology of those consoles were being, pushed to the max a bit. I would say more so on the PlayStation 2 than the GameCube and the Xbox, which I believe, both those consoles could have done a lot more. So for graphics, for many, one of the biggest reasons I feel that consoles, move along into the next generation. We've been in a somewhat nice spot in terms of a standard controller. Right now, allowing us to play, most games comfortably across all platforms. With of course Nintendo still trying to change things up a little. Many times for the better with their older consoles. Like the Wii and the Wii U, especially for me. I suppose even then, if the market refuses to adopt some of these ideas, but so for me, I could have had the Wii go on for even longer. And especially the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, both of which I could honestly still be playing now quite happily from a graphical point of view if no other platforms existed. And this leads me on to my main view on this topic and why I personally believe we ultimately get bored with our consoles after a few years. But just before I get into that second, I always said that the Wii in terms of just the motion controls and ideas for it. Just could have done so much more from the developers. And as soon as I mention them, this is what I get into to the main point, why I feel we get bored of consoles. I feel we get bored, or at least I do. I'm saying we, in general. I get bored, we get bored because of the games. Which essentially means we get bored of what developers offer us in terms of software. I honestly, believe this is the reason why. We know technology for gaming has been moving along at such a fast pace, whether that's for better or worse. But in the modern era, we found ourselves, for the most part, becoming more and more content with how games look and the types of worlds that can be created. So for many genres, so lost my train of thought then. So many genres, have essentially been covered, and arguably for many mastered in what they can offer, which with each new game releasing in certain genres, starting to I suppose see diminishing returns. Not essentially just because of graphics or sound, but more in the fact that games are also essentially playing the same now, or are in the realms of this is nothing new, but still plays great. It's much how I feel about recent games like the latest God of War on the PlayStation 4 and the recent Resident Evil 2 remake. The latter of which I'm currently trying to play. And I'm sure I'll feel the same way about Devil May Cry 5, which is also sitting on my shelf, ready to be played. These are all great games, but the sense of being there, done that in so many aspects of these games means that sure, graphically they can we can be blown away, but interaction and gameplay wise, you're essentially left with a sense of strong familiarity. Which means the games need to be doing something else to keep you engaged in terms of the God of War and Resident Evil 2. It's in terms of those games, it's a story and graphical spectacle that impresses you the most and then keeps you moving forward more so than anything else. At least from my point of view. You see, people think I hate on a lot of modern games. But let me tell you how I approach new games and why some leave a lasting impression while others don't. And I'll try to pick a few examples. But at the same time, it's something I need to do on this channel. I need you to understand me more as a gamer. I don't talk about the things I love enough on this channel. It's just something I'm going to be doing. But anyway, let's start with Resident Evil 2 remake. Whilst I brought it up. For what I've played so far, it's a great remake and a great game. Solid in most areas, which leaves me with little to grumble about it. If I was to review it, but is it blowing me away? No, not in the slightest. And why, you might ask? Well, this is my natural process when playing or viewing new games, and my process is what came before. And what's this game doing now? For the most part, that's where my brain goes. So immediately, you can look at Resident Evil 2 and go, wow, graphically this looks great. Far better than many games I've played. So like I said before, the graphical wow factor is pushing me on. As from a gameplay point of view, for me, it's doing absolutely nothing new. Why? Because I looked to the past and compared it to what I've played before. Zombies bursting through locked doors is nothing new. Held in the same series, games like Resident Evil Remake and Resident Evil 4. Done that 15 plus years ago. As for targeting limbs or running through seamless environments with no evident loading for the most part, we've tasted this in similar games, like Dead Space and Metroid Prime, or even Soul Reaver on the PlayStation 1 and Dreamcast, and previous Resident Evil games as examples, like I said with Resident Evil 4. So that's nothing new. Dark torchlit environments. Go back to games like Silent Hill and a wealth of other similar games of those genres. And of course, with this being a remake, the story isn't going to fully grab me the way the original originally did. I know for the most part what's going to happen. So does all this mean that Resident Evil 2 remake is a bad game? No, not at all. But what it does mean that even after all these years, all the advancements in technology, all the advancements in game design, we're playing a solid title that essentially does nothing new outside of looking prettier for the most part. So what's the argument? Could Capcom have done something that we haven't seen before in gaming? Perhaps. But you could also argue that it wasn't necessary for the remake of an old game. Something I agree with. So I asked myself, in this generation we have had 3 Resident Evil games. One being a brand new title, and the other being 2 remakes. I think we can agree that all 3 games, from a graphical standpoint, look great, and for the most part, run extremely, well. So what's pushing us to decide a new console? The belief that only the next generation of hardware can offer something new and exciting. How can that be when we've realistically only had one brand new Resident Evil game that isn't somewhat restricted by something that came before, and that being Resident Evil 7? Would we not be content with a Resident Evil 8 and 9 that took the great reception of Resident Evil 2 remakes, evolved on that and pushed the gameplay, interactivity and graphics into new areas we have yet to see from a Resident Evil game? Do you truly believe that requires a new console right now, or is it just a developer playing it safe with well-established gameplay mechanics that have simply become good enough, but also perhaps too familiar? Do we really need a PlayStation 5 for the next God of War to be amazing and new? Is the PS4 truly not capable of making a great looking and playing sequel to this game? Perhaps it highlights one of the big issues with AAA gaming today, where graphics are indeed the biggest driver of people desiring the next generation of hardware. Convinced that this is where the excitement lies. Then of course we get a Wii U game during this same generation that, from a gameplay point of view, puts to shame most AAA games on the market, and for many, the Wii U is already generations behind. I'm talking about Breath of the Wild there. Imagine what games we'd have if all developers tried to push every aspect of their portfolios, even slightly beyond the established norm, building up catalogues of ideas, successes and failures, but on hardware and at cost levels that are more manageable, because we've remained within these stable, content generations for enough time for these developers to get used to the hardware, build their portfolios and bring costs down, and these worlds start to become cheaper instead of having to push on. Nintendo saw this with the Nintendo Wii, of course. I could sit in this current generation of consoles for absolutely years to come, if the games kept coming and pushing past every aspect of what's possible with each release from each developer, at least for some of their major titles. For me, it's always and will always be about the games when it comes to the need for advancing into a new hardware generation. Unless of course we get original hardware ideas and inputs, which Nintendo mostly bring to the party. So what will I be thinking when I fired up Devil May Cry 5 eventually on my PlayStation 4? I'll be thinking, what came before and what is it doing now? Where does my brain go? Devil May Cry 1, 2, 3 and 4, all of which I've played. Then it also goes to Metal Gear Revengeance and Bayonetta 1 and 2. Or even most recently, as I've played it before, Astral Chain. Devil May Cry 5 essentially needs to be better than these and offer something new in order for me personally to be blown away by what the PS4 and Capcom are doing. Otherwise, it will most likely still be a great game and I'll enjoy it, but that familiarity will kick in again, perhaps leaving me wanting more. That's not the hardware's fault. That's not the PS4's fault. It's only Capcom's and what they delivered in terms of game content. And I said Capcom. This goes out to every other developer. And like I said, I talk about Nintendo a lot on this channel. But you'll see me if you follow me on Twitter as well. I might not make full-on videos about it because I don't think it's worth the time sometimes. But I'll chew out games like Yoshi's Crafted World and Kirby Star Allies because I've been asking for these types of games to go to the next level. Where they haven't. But you can still play something like Yoshi's Crafted World, which takes a great design aesthetic, nails the platform and nails the gameplay, and still is a great game, and I absolutely love it. It's my favorite Yoshi game. But I know for the fact that they could do a lot more with Yoshi. I've always begged for like 3D Yoshi games and 3D Kirby games. We've had a taste of them. I had a taste of Yoshi in 3D originally with Super Mario Sunshine. You can play on Yoshi in 3D there, and Super Mario DS. You play as Yoshi. If you all remember that game, if you played that, and Mario Galaxy 2 and all this stuff. But developers, we're at this point now where genres are very familiar. It takes indies to try something new and radical within the budgets that they have, and AAA developers can push out all the bang for buck that they want with games, for example, like Anthem. I won't even talk about how broken and trash that game was, but in terms of scale and everything, it's still, in terms of AAA budget, it's still done nothing new to really, push and take gaming on these platforms to the next level in terms of gameplay and all this stuff. It's just not there. It's still just a third-person shooter doing stuff that we've seen before. And the only thing that they had behind their backs on that was how graphically impressive for the most part that it looked. The same with like games like Battlefield and stuff. We have just feel like we've reached that point. So it's the games that will get me excited about the next generation. It's why I wasn't excited about the Xbox One. And it's still why I don't own an Xbox One, because just in terms of game-wise, there's just nothing there to make me go, I need that console in my life, compared to other platforms I own. I own a PC, Nintendo Switch, and PlayStation 4. There's really nothing on the Xbox One to make me scream and shout that I need that console. And I had an Xbox 360, I played all the Gears of War and some of the Forzas and all this stuff, all the Halos, and yeah, there's just nothing there. So for me, why do we get bored of consoles? Because of the developers not keeping us excited with the games. And then of course you could argue then that it's the console manufacturers' faults as well for pushing themselves out of their comfort zones and not pushing their own platforms. We were talking on the Juices Loose podcast a long ago. I think it was Mr. T who said and Terrell, the Insane Game Crew, who both said that Sony were in such a good place right now. They still got games coming, big games. Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us 2. The PS4 got some quality titles coming, but now they just want to cut it off and go on to the next hardware as if they can't reinvigorate and keep invigorating the current PlayStation 4 as it is with great content from great third parties and first party content. Just keep it coming. People are just graphically, games are amazing. Look at Spider-Man. My God, don't you want a Spider-Man 2 on the PlayStation 4? Do you honestly believe that we can't get another great looking Spider-Man 2 game and push that genre just a bit more with some great stuff? Of course we could. We don't need the PlayStation 5 for that. People will say stuff like, "Oh, it'd be faster load and all this stuff." Get out of here, man. I'm not interested in that stuff. We've dealt with that for years, absolutely years. But yeah, going off on one end ended in a bit of a rant, didn't I? Yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one. Bit of a long discussion again, but I thought it was one worth having. Leave your comments. I'll reply to every one of you. I'll try to keep in my last comments, sometimes I feel like sometimes I can come off a bit blunt and aggressive, but it's always difficult when you're trying to reply to stuff and the text can sound in a certain way, and sometimes I do put it in a certain way. But don't ever be afraid to comment on my channel. I'm not going to string you up to dry, anything like that. If you've got something negative to say, whether it's about my content or about the subject, or you completely disagree, I myself also need to learn how to reply and counteract in certain ways as well. I felt the need to say that for some reason at the end there, but yeah, I want everyone to comment. I really do. Everyone who views my video and sticks through to the end or watches it, please comment. And honestly, I'll reply to every single one of you. But as always, I'm done. Thanks for listening. Take care all, and peace.